Hey guys and girls, let's talk about square bill crankbaits because this is the time of the year when square bills really start beginning to get back in vogue again. You know, square bills are good early in the year. They're good over the grass a little bit in the summertime, but they're not used nearly as much as the bass have a tendency in a lot of the lakes. We don't have a lot of vegetation to go down quite a bit deeper, and so the square bills are not so popular. Square bills were mainly designed to fish shallow and to fish in heavy brush. So think about that when you're going to fish a crankbait. You fish a square bill really a lot of times in the same type of area that you might fish a spinnerbait. Over the tops of brush, over the tops of grass, a square bill that will not run very deep. And don't be afraid to use these little bitty tiny square bills. And the little tiny ones, sometimes they're not going to run very deep and they're a little bit more difficult to throw. You might even want to be throwing them on a spinning reel. But the little tiny ones sometimes will produce fish when a lot of other things won't, especially if you have a cold front, if you got a north wind, if you got a really hard lake that's a bite is very difficult, doesn't have many fish in it. The little tiny baits, lakes that's got a lot of pressure on them, lakes that have a lot of tournaments on them, a lot of activity out there every weekend. Sometimes you can move down to the smaller crankbaits and you're in good shape. Now, when we talk about square bill, this is a difference right here. This is a square bill. This is a Lucky Strike bait. This is a square bill, and it's also a Lucky Strike bait, and this is a round bill. That's the difference in the two. The round bill, and these bills can be longer, they can be pointed differently, but basically we just call them a deep diving bill, and a square bill, which is square. The advantage of a square bill, and the reason square bills was developed, was to be able to fish them down into brush piles and have them bang off of that brush and not dig into the brush, not get caught in between two limbs, just bounce off of them. And so it's a very, very good bait to use when you're fishing really heavy cover, log jams, stumps, brush tops, things where you're going to need to be bumping into quite a bit of stuff. The square bill is the bait to use. Now, there are square bills made nowadays that will go pretty doggone deep. So don't think of it as just totally a shallow water bait. This is what they were designed for in the first place, and they work very well. Now let me give you another little hint here. If you're going to fish this thing in really thick, heavy cover. You see this hook right here? This is the hook that's going to get hung up. You pull that thing down, that hook right there, this bottom one right here will usually be the one that gets hung up. So what you want to do is take a pair of dikes, take your side cutters, and just come in here and lay that up against the end right there so you'll know which hook to cut off. Simply cut that hook off. Get rid of it. So now when you pull that over the brush, that hook is not there. So you've taken this treble hook and you made it into a double hook and you've cut off the right one. Now don't just cut one of them off and think you're right. You have to lay it up against the bait. And once you lay it against the bait, then you can pick out what one you want to cut off. But cut that off. That'll make a big difference. Fishing line with crankbaits. Let's talk about that real quickly and then we'll talk a little bit about colors. Fishing line with crankbaits. Just a good thing to remember is the heavier the line, the shallower that crankbait is going to run. So in other words, it's a 15-pound test line or 14-pound test line the crankbait's not going to get nearly as deep, whether you're fishing a square bill, a round bill, deep diving bill, whatever. The heavier line, the less depth you're going to get out of that bait. So if you want to fish a bait up over the top of the grass and it's just barely getting down into the grass, use bigger line. Just pull you out a rod that's got bigger line on it. Now maybe it has that 6 inches or a foot less depth and it doesn't get down into that. So that's a good tip to use just about any time you're getting down into stuff like that. Conversely, if you've got grass that's down, say 5 feet and you got a crankbait that's only 1 and 3, you want a crankbait that'll run 4, 4.5, sometimes you can simply move down to lighter line, take the 14, 15-pound test on, move down to 10, that bait's going to go deeper. That bait's going to go deeper. So the line size controls the depth that it runs. And, you know, a lot of people throw crankbaits on braid. I like to throw it on monofilament or copolymer. If you throw it on a braid, more than likely you're going to get more bites if you'll tie on a monofilament or a 4-clobbered leader on that braid. More than likely. Not all the time. Keep in mind when you're fishing braid, it does not stretch. That makes the bites feel real good and real distinct, and you got a lot more feel on your rod and reel. But when you get ready to get a crankbait unhung, well, you use the bow and arrow technique, and I'll teach you how to do the bow and arrow technique. You do the bow and arrow technique, the stretch in the line, well, is it stretch a rubber band, like you stretch a rubber band out and you turn loose of it, it pops back. It's exactly what the stretch in the fishing line does, and it'll pop back and kind of move that bait back a little bit many times, unhook your bait and get it loose. If you're fishing with braided line, very difficult to make that happen, very difficult to make that happen. Square bill crankbaits, dynamite in the fall of the year, and also we mentioned brush piles. They're absolutely great around rocks. Rocks are one thing that really eats a lot of crankbaits, particularly if you've got a round bill or a long bill deep diving crankbait like this. It digs down in those rocks and it gets hung up and you just can't get it loose. Sometimes you can get back behind it and maybe pull it out the same way it went in, but it eats a lot of crankbaits. Square bill crankbait, it comes down and hits those rocks, and again, it bounces off. Got this wide square bill, and it'll bounce off that, and it won't get hung up. Rocks are just an absolute dynamite place to fish in the wintertime. And remember this, guys and girls. If you've got a lake that's got a lot of rocks in it and a little bit of wood, fish the wood. If you've got a lake that's got a lot of wood and a few rocks, fish the rocks. That seems to work better than anything else. If you open anybody's tackle box, and I just picked a couple of them here and opened them up, and you can look and see you have a myriad of colors. You have every color under the rainbow, and they're all a little different. How do you pick out what's what? Well, there's some rules of thumb that I use in fishing that really work pretty well. Your colors are broken down into just a few colors, and they're all built around bait fish, basically. Shad, bluegill, crappie, and crawfish. That's really pretty much what you're built around. Now, one of the simplest ways to learn about crawfish colors is just simply catch a crawfish and look at it. That'll tell you what color the crawfish are in the lake that you're fishing. They can be a lot of different colors. They can be a lot of different colors. And, but usually they'll have some red on them, they'll have some brown on them, they might have some green or some orange on them. But it's very critical that you get your colors right. And now a lot of times what I do, if I find that I need some orange or some red or some chartreuse on a bait, is I'll use spike it pins and color my crankbaits. I'll use dip and dye and dip my soft plastics in there and add that little bit of color. Now, in all of the color studies we did at the University of Oklahoma with Dr. Lauren Hill, who's long since gone home to be with the Lord, but he did a 9-year study on color and largemouth bass. And throughout that study, we learned a lot of things about largemouth bass. But the one thing that we did learn was that the colors that they can see best in most shallow water applications are red and blue. So if you've got some sort of red on a bait, and it's why so many of the baits that I design have a red eye in them. If you've got some red on the bait, if you've got some blue on the bait, pretty good shape. If you got both colors on a bait, that might be even better, red and blue. But if you've got colors that emulate a shad, colors that emulate a bluegill, and the bluegill can be a lot of different colors also in your lake. So as you catch bluegill, you can kind of figure out what kind of colors you want to use there. Lots of different type of bluegill too, and they have different colors, and they're different in different parts of the country. And then of course crawfish. So those are your three main patterns. And on your crappie colored baits, your shad colored baits, pretty much anything it's black and chrome, blue and chrome, works really well. It's got a little green in there. If you catch a shad and look at it and turn it in the sunshine, you'll see a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. So it's something that's got, so that's a splatter color right there, but I'd call that kind of a good color to use for crappie. Looks like baby crappie. Bass eat lots and lots and lots of crappie. The bluegill color, this is a red ear right here. It's a red ear color, and it's got a lot of chartreuse. It's got a lot of red. It's got orange in it. All of the colors that you got in a bluegill. Now the bluegill, like I say, can be a lot of different colors. You want to fish the shad colors a little bit more in the summertime, a little bit more in the fall. Crawfish colors, it's some sort of brown. And again, crawfish can be a lot of colors. There's a crawfish color. There's a crawfish color, and they're totally different. Look at that, they're totally different. And this is even a crawfish pattern. This has got a pattern on the side of it that even looks like a crawfish. Those are both crawfish colors. Right here's another crawfish color. Also, a gold would be a crawfish color. And fishing a golden with an orange belly or something like that. There's another crawfish color. And you see those colors are all different, but they're all crawfish colors. And they all will really work good. Now, there are many lakes, particularly in the springtime, where this really bright red works extremely good. Sam Rayburn, I go to Sam Rayburn, this is the color I throw. I mean, the last time I was at Sam Rayburn at a tournament, I won $10,000, $15,000, and all I threw, in fact, that was one of the very baits I threw right there, that little American Original Deep Smoothie in the red color, and I was throwing all red colors. It worked really good. Another color that, see if I've got one handy here, is Fire Tiger. And, you know, these baits are kind of Fire Tiger, but that's more just straight chartreuse. I don't have a Fire Tiger really handy here. But a Fire Tiger color, which is really This bait right here might kind of qualify for that. A fire tiger color is the really bright, really bright chartreuse. And that's got a little bit of a parrot color with that on top. Red hooks can also add color to your bait. A lot of people love red hooks. I fish red hooks quite a little bit, and it seems to help to have the red hooks on there. Again, add some red, add some blue to your bait so you can add the red hooks on there. The main thing probably in catching fish is as far as colors on crankbaits is during the summertime, bluegill seem to be the things that they're feeding on more than anything else. Bluegill and crappie. So if you'll just kind of stick with colors that emulate that, you're going to be good. Springtime, like I said, crawfish color is really difficult to beat. Now, they eat crawfish year round. They eat bluegill year round. They eat shad year round. But bass is an opportunistic feeder. He will eat whatever is easy, and the bigger the fish, the easier the bait they want to get. So whatever is easy, whatever is prevalent in the lakes that you're fishing, that's the color of baits that you want to stick with. Use a little common sense in it. Bass fishing is a common sense game. Doesn't take super intelligence. And Lord, it's a good deal, because I'd never be a good bass fisherman if it took super intelligence. But it takes a lot of common sense. Common sense. If you see bass blowing up on shad, those shad-colored baits. If you see fish feeding around boat docks on bluegill or hanging around boat docks, it's a good time to do that. If you see them hitting these yellow mayflies or blue dragonflies, again, same type of situation. Whatever they're eating, that's kind of a good color to use. And, you know, a color selector, I don't know, I think you can still buy a color selector. A color selector will teach you the right colors to use that the fish can see the best in a lot of different colors of water. A couple colors to think about that you might not use very much. One is bubble gum. Now, I know you girls are going to call that pink, and that's fine. The girls can call it pink. You guys, I prefer if you call it bubble gum. A pink bait, bubble gum color. This bait is extremely good when you have clear water. The clearer the water, the better this bait becomes. It's also a good bait to use in spinnerbait, as a bubblegum colored skirt in clear water. It's also a great thing to use in a sinking worm or a wacky worm or a trick worm. Again, a bright pink color. Another color that you might not think about too much, and I've got a couple baits here that I've got a little bit of it on. In muddy water, really muddy water, I'm talking about muddy water, not dingy water, but muddy water. It's right here, purple. See, I've got purple on the top of that bait. I've got purple on the top of that stick bait right there. Purple, muddy water, purple. Again, same thing, purple skirts if you're going to throw a spinnerbait. We have caught in really muddy water in that Arkansas River here in Oklahoma and Arkansas. When in the springtime it gets just like you see coon tracks on top of it, it's so muddy, we move to purple spinnerbaits and we catch them. Lakes that get muddy in the springtime, and I know that not many of the lakes are muddy right now this time of the year. Lakes that get muddy in the springtime, go to those purple baits. Baits that's got some purple on them, you will be amazed at what you catch. You cannot really have the wrong color on very often that will just totally keep you from catching any fish at all, unless you're fishing where there's no fish. If you will get around the fish, color will become less important. But that said, color can sometimes mean the difference in catching 2 or 3 or 4 fish and catching 20 or 30 fish. So just pay attention, use good common sense, and have a lot of fun out there. And hey, one of the best things to do is fish with somebody that loves to change baits. And then just sort of suggest, if you're fish for 15 or 20 or 30 minutes and don't catch a fish, just suggest, you know, I think maybe Jimmy said when the water's muddy like this, we ought to try a purple one. And if you'll wait a minute, they'll get down and tie a purple one on. You won't have to try it. Once they catch a couple, it'd be a good idea to tie that purple on. Colors can make a difference. But probably the most important thing, stop your Ranger boat where there's some bass. Guys and girls, have a great one out there. And remember, I sure do love you.